days, the tribal trumpet has been blown in a manner that I thought had been dying down, and that folks seem to be part of this concert, which is a bit worrying. And that after the events of the weekend, where the president did make a visit to certain counties, and what we saw happening in different stadia and the things that were said and listened to, that we then hear the tribal card indeed being played, and folks are asking questions and people are saying things in a certain manner that is a bit worrying in terms of where Kenyan psyche is, or where the thinking really is. That should we actually be focusing on tribal issues of where people are from and what they deserve or not deserve, as opposed to the things that actually affect us in society?
I mean, the country is at a point where a lot needs to be discussed. We talk about tribalism in the country, and while each and every Kenyan has the right to be proud of where it is they come from, it gets to be a problem when politics takes advantage of tribalism and disenfranchises some people in the country based on that card. And it's a problem that has existed in the country for a very, very, very long time. And perhaps it's about time we started having conversations and finding a solution to this problem, because if we don't, then it is a problem that will continue hindering us from achieving and realizing the aspirations that the Constitution has for the people of Kenya, you know?
Indeed. Joining us on the line this morning is politician Kabando Wakabando, and we say a very good morning to you. Good morning. Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Very well, and how are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Well, Karibu Sana, and thank you for joining us this morning. I mean, albeit I know that you had to be in a different part of the country at the moment, but it's glad that we can get your insights and be part of this conversation today.
Karibu Sana, and glad to be here.
Thank you so much. I mean, just looking at things that have happened over the last couple of days, and you being in a position whereby, as a politician, as somebody who has always spoken around the issues of what we should actually be focusing on, not necessarily, where you're from, but what you can actually do to lurch the country forward. What are your thoughts about a lot of what we've seen? And lest we forget, is something that you talk about all the time, and we do here as well, that lest we forget what tribal politics and tribal innuendo and conversations actually did to this country about a decade or so, a little bit more over that ago. What are your thoughts about a little bit of what we are seeing happening today, and what are the things that we ought to be careful about?
Thank you very much for having me in this conversation, and it is very important that we do reflect on Kenya's history in leadership, particularly post-colonial, what has been happening and what has blocked Kenya's path to prosperity. Everybody you talk to who comes from outside, particularly Africa, praises Kenya as a nation that is very uniquely placed geographically, a country that has very rich diversity, and a nation of a people who are very hospitable, people who are very warm, welcoming. And of course, we can't forget that even in critical times in the past, global surveys have always placed Kenya at the top as a very optimistic community, a people who have a lot of hope and resilience, who can reemerge the birth our motherland with a lot of hope, a lot of strength and confidence. Now, when you talk about what is happening with the ethnic voices and the obvious cries for people to be at the center of national leadership and politics, it's a really complex question. Because one, in a very universal way and in a broader context, the Constitution of Kenya does recognize in the very beginning that community of interest is important, that people coming together in their neighborhoods, in their places of work, in their institutions, may they be educational or otherwise, is recognized, enshrined in the Constitution, and it is promoted. The spirit and letter. So that's important to recognize that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the people coming forward, even in the ethnic identities. In fact, the same Constitution talks about our heritage, celebrating our culture, our heritage, and therefore even promoting ethnic languages and promoting culture and the heritage of our people is important. Now, on the flip side, is where the dominant ethnic groups, and in this case, you will talk about the Kalenjin, the Kikuyu, the Luo, to a small extent, even the Kamba. Those that are the Luyas, those that are the frontiers in terms of numbers, numerical numbers. We easily forget that we are not only 5 groups. We have many smaller and the smallest. They are the Ogiet, they are the Trombos,
many small ones, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So when we are talking about ethnicity, if you go today and challenge even adult people, even of my age, to name all the 42 ethnic groups, it will be very difficult for many people. In fact, I guess that very few would go beyond number 10. They will start struggling. They will just talk about the Somali here, they will talk about the Kalenjin there and all that. So the flip side, as I said, is that those who are numerically superior to others sometimes may assume, and I say they may, in regard to the leaderships, not the numbers of the innocent populaces that traverse the country, that are mingling and integrated in the country. So we who are at the front and who are loud and who are prominent would easily search the ethnic card because we want to mobilize our numbers behind us, and then we also want to dominate. And this question has also come. Yesterday I was reading a report from the media, and it's an official report of a government survey, or rather an official examination of domination in a company. Kenyan company, is a national company, and you'll find that 50% of employees there, even in the Kenya revenue, sometimes even in the official civil service, in the bureaucracy, that domination, and it is bad for the country, it's dangerous for the country, and even these fights that are evident from election cycle to the other. Anyway, let me say all the times, because we start campaigns immediately after the other election, which is not criminal, which is okay. People do what they want, it's democratic, but it's like a competition of 3 or 4 groups. It is not a competition that involves the people who are in Nordhor, the Lysamis. It is not a competition that involves people who are somewhere in Kilifi or the interior parts of Baringo, if I want to mention that, the sub-tribe. It's a competition of the bigwigs, and bigwigs in the context, again, of numbers.
So Commander, can I ask you that you're saying essentially that even this tribal card that we're talking about that's being played, that it just happens to be that there happen to be powerful people, whether that power is brought about by, economic advantage or whatever, that there happen to be powerful people who happen to be from particular tribes and they use that to their advantage?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because look at even the delegations that go to see a president in Kenya, the current and even the previous president. Mostly you will not hear of a delegation of the smallest ethnic groups who are culturally distinct and who are recognizable by their ethnic traits. So it's always a mobilization of geographical groups, or because of the electoral domination, or the individuals who are elite at the top. If you take, for instance, a quick examination of the delegation that goes to see President seeking development, which is of course guaranteed in the constitution, to canvass for government resources to come to certain areas. You'll find it is the politicians who are elected, former politicians who have been appointed or elected in those areas. It is groups that are loud in politics. Yet, if you go to countryside across the entire nation, you look out for developmental initiatives. And I can say this with confidence, having had opportunity to be in one electoral unit for some time. The enduring development projects that I can now see that may be regarded as they were done that particular time, I'm not the one who initiated. And this for a fact, it is individuals within communities who come forward with the proposals about water, about irrigation, about keeping dairy goats, about rearing rabbits, and so on and so forth. And these are not features that dominate in these conversations when they are gathered and when they are mobilized. So it may not always be for the people. It is mostly for the elite. I was yesterday looking at the people who are speaking at the parley, I'll call it parley, a meeting of rivals at the State House yesterday from one county in Nyanza. Let me be specific, in Nyanza. And the people who are taking the front seats are not necessarily the community leaders from every groups from that Nyanza county. They were mostly the politicians, current and the former. So it was a display of, we have harvested this politician who was our rival in 2022. This one who served the other regime, we have brought them on board. Is a plethora or a gathering of politicians seeking to reconcile among themselves.
Kabando, as a country continues to deal and grapple with tribalism and ethnicity in the country, well, the Constitution recognizes our ethnic groups and recognizes them in the Constitution. How then can Kenyans themselves change the trajectory and the conversations around what it is they want? And even if we're talking in terms of different groups coming together, tribes discussing on what it is they want to be done, that it is not a card for politicians to divide the country, but recognizing that it is a right under the Constitution, we have been recognized, but it is not a tool that will determine who gets development, who does not get development, because as you say, development is a right for every Kenyan. How do we deal with that problem and ensure that Kenyans get it, politicians get it, so that we are all on the same table?
Last year, 2022, was a very important turning point in a national conversation about public affairs and public accountabilities. If we want to change, and indeed change is inevitable one way or the other, sometimes a reversal, going back to the worst times in the past, sometimes also going to the past glory and causing a national rebirth. One way to do it is to have a memorandum of agreement with the electorate ahead of elections. Make it very loud, make it very radical. Let me give an example. If we do, and we shall, get an accountability charter, a charter, that agreement of the do's and the don'ts ahead of elections, and it is popularized, and it becomes an avalanche, a momentous face in Kenya, where we go to elections, we know we have the constitution, we know all you need to succeed in Kenya is to abide, subscribe, abide, and oblige to the constitutional requirement that is in the letter, what is written in the constitution, and what is intended, the letter and the spirit of the constitution. But since you know that you are falling short of that achievement, and that even now there is a lot of impunity, the fires of court of orders, imbalances in unemployment, incompetent placements, and so on and so forth, then we write our accountability charter, and it is unlike in 2002, where you have the NAC Party, National Alliance Party of Kenya, and the Moi Kibaki Wamalo and the Gilu, and the LDP and the Raila Kalonzo and the group. Now which was signed in secret. I was in that room and I did not know the content at Hilton, which was signed, and it was about power sharing. Again in 2013, I remember I was in the TNA party, which was in partnership with the Ruto, URP. Again, although I was in the camp, even in the presidential campaign, didn't know the content because it was an argument between the two individuals on behalf of the two parties, saying they are going to have 50-50 sharing in the cabinet. Come to 2022, except the announcement where I was also present at the KICC on the 15th of May 2022 when Raila was naming Karua as a running mate, and he mentioned about 5 individuals who will be given cabinet slot, and he said even the specific cabinet slot that those individuals would be given. The actual final details that may have happened between Raila and the then cabinet president Uhuru, Jubilee's party, and the other parties. And exactly what happened even in Ruto's agreement, sharing of the seats in the cabinet and in the National Assembly in the Senate. Those details belonged to a smaller group of people, maybe the presidential candidate and their closest confidants.
And isn't that the problem? I'm sorry, but isn't that the problem, though, that the fate of millions of people essentially is decided by a small cabal of people who, for all intents and purposes, whether perception or reality, that are more interested in their personal gains or their personal positioning as opposed to the overall well-being or livelihood, uplifting of the people. And I'm taking this and I'm going directly to some of the things that we've seen you, Kabando, post recently on socials, where you talk about rights to freedom, rights to expression, where we talk about securing livelihoods for Kenyans and making sure that the estate or the character of the Kenyan people is actually held sacred as the one thing that you must then go into leadership to protect. So you're drawing that example and talking about people, a small group of people sitting and having a conversation, essentially sealing the fate of a nation. And we seem to forget that in this day and age that that is the cry from the hearts of many Kenyans today, that remove this secret mission agenda, remove this small group of people agenda, and open up this conversation if we're actually going to lurch forward. And I don't know what your thoughts are around that.
Now, actually, I was coming to state a suggestion as a way forward, and that's why I mentioned the accountability charter. Is a term, as I said, for that general agreement, which may redeem or which can resolve some of these problematic realities we have in the national leadership, because it's all about the leadership. Once the leadership is sorted out and it's okay, then we go forward. If we sit, and I said we shall, because there is an effort that some of us are involved in, which may not be unveiled at this stage, but it will be canvassed. And in that accountability charter, we address the following, for instance: national appointments. Do Kenyans know that almost without exception, the dominant political leaders have their families and the kin and the cronies nominated to national parliament, to regional parliament, to executives, to diplomatic missions, and so on and so forth. So if an agreement is now written, and we converse, and we know you are our presidential flag bearer in the 2027 elections. You are a signatory to a very publicized and a very promoted agreement in the wards, in the 1,450 electoral wards in the country, in the 290 constituencies, everywhere in the counties. Then that matter is canvassed that there shall not be an appointment without the approval of this organ or the other organ, and in fact, it can be pre-election agreement and then list of those young people, because we also want to anchor at the mainstream and enhance the leadership of the younger generation, because we are all in agreement that they are the torch bearers and they are flag bearers in terms of this non-violent proactive revolution. Then that issue of nepotism will have been resolved.
Yeah, Kabando, you've mentioned something very important in terms of pre-election charters and agreements that we have seen have happened before. If you remember, before the Kenya Kwanza government, pretty much President William Ruto went across the country, signed charters with everyone on his promises with regard to the manifesto that he was selling to Kenyans. But
it was a market, it was fallacious, because I come from a county, 019, Nyeri County. There is, if you go to the grassroots and you ask those who are officials or delegates at the venue where the county conversations were held, it was just a political mobilization of individuals facilitated with the money, and then elites traveled from Nairobi, so-called economic and political advisors, and then they say, we have come with this Nyeri Charter, what shall we do? Who knows now what was discussed in Nyeri and what were the exact agreements? It was just political rhetoric from Nyeri to Lamu to Marsabit, Isiolo, and other parts of the country.
Which then begs the question, how then do we ensure that these charters and agreements that people get into before the elections are actually upheld, because then it forms the basis upon which people are elected into government? How do we ensure that the politics that is being played is politics of truth, of respect, and not conmanship?
Now, to do that, if you are holding the ward and the constituency and even the county platforms or the forums, and there has been a very intense campaign of delegating, so that the meetings are not just impromptu, called previous evening, and then you call them public hearings like the ones we have now. You also see the public hearings you have even about the national budget and other public legislations. We mobilize very well. First of all, we emphasize very much about putting the actual detail to that document, and that detail is in the media, like this media, Space FM. It is on the social media. It is on the physical platform where the meetings are being held in those smallest electoral or administrative units, the sub-locations, or the ones that I said, the locations. If it is made very popular as a manifesto, remember, can I remind you, in 2000, a few months, maybe 2 months or 3 months before 2002 elections, there was a public pronouncement. I was in a small group called Demo 2000, and then a professional club that was in the NAC campaign, the Rainbow campaign. And I remember at the Intercontinental Hotel, and the live on radio, then was a citizen dominant. Mwai Kibaki, the flag bearer for the National Rainbow Coalition, read a paper as a promise. He talked about the 100 days, his first 100 days in office. So it was, although not in the level that I'm talking about, that should be in 2025, 26, 27, it was a voice and a message that people sat, listened word for word in a paid airtime, and listened and concluded the things that the candidate has said he will do and his team will do. And one of the key, actually the key that made the arrivals call a press conference at Norfolk Hotel a few hours later was about the free primary education. And remember, that was implemented on day one because it was very popularized and people did not wait to go to be recruited in the villages. People, even an 8-year-old Kemani Maruge, they deliver themselves to classrooms, making records in the Guinness Book of Records. So, if we do that popularization, then the key word here is popularizing. If we popularize, and then, for instance, let me give you 3 lists. Let me give you, not even 3 lists. Let me give 50 lists.
Okay. 50 then.
No, 50 only in the forward.
Okay.
The county assemblies, that is 1. The National Assembly, that is 2. The Senate, that is 3. And IALA, the East African Legislative Assembly, that is 4. Because if you give a list, nominated a list according to the people who are active and who deserve, and you negotiate with the groups, lobby groups, you negotiate with the millennials, with the Gen Zs particularly, you not have these politicians who nominate their sons and daughters in a nepotistic way, okay, in a chronologistic way,
yes,
to these 4 governance institutions. If again we had a list given pre-election about candidates who are credible, who qualify, who are suggested by parties on top as possible administrators in the constitutional commissions and in other important government appointments. That would be easy. It is done elsewhere, even in America they do that. Like I remember, we had an ambassador here called Simid Hempstone. If you read The Rogue Ambassador, his book, The Rogue Ambassador, he was there in 1980 and he was very transformative. He knew that if the president then, the candidate then, Republican, George Walker Bush, won, he would be won against Jimmy Carter. He would be appointed as an ambassador to Kenya. He was a journalist, but that was something negotiated ahead. And even in the caucus of the Republicans, they knew this is happening, and this can happen. In terms of that area, we can do that. Another area, let me just say this area, the area of impunity and corruption. Yeah, we should be able before elections to negotiate. We know we are not 100%, but we should be 100%. It is not. There's nothing impossible in a country having 100% people without blemish occupying important seats in the country. It has happened elsewhere. It has happened in Malaysia. We read the book called, A Doctor in the House by Mohammed Mahathir, the former leader in Malaysia. Or you read the book about Singapore, from that to fast forward in a generation by Lee Kuan Yew. It happened. So if that argument ahead states, and this person is voted on that platform, for instance, we currently review ask, people would expect these administrators to fight the corruption. Did they promise they are going to fight the corruption? No. In fact, they say corruption is not our priority. So if we make it a priority, it's about the elections, it's about the people, it's about the electorate. It is not always about the leader making that agreement or that promise. So we can also initiate that. This is part of the civic education.
Indeed. Commander, I think that's a question for a lot of folk, because the understanding, I think, is across board that folks understand that, there is a certain level of participation that you must engage in. And then there's an even higher level of participation that then is demanded of people if you're really going to have a people-centered governance. And then when you talk about things like corruption and impunity that we see, which is the problem in a lot of the areas where we talk about there's no funding today to be able to do 1, 2, 3, where we speak about because certain people are then being taken care of and others are not. It's a fundamental issue when it comes to then our lack of progression. The question is, can you attend to it today and take a break tomorrow? And they say, okay, well, we can then be involved in this fight against corruption next week. I don't have time today, maybe sometime next month. Is it something that you can do on the day that you choose? Or must it be a constant accountability journey that we're on to ensure that this vice actually reduces and then eventually is eliminated?
It is something that can be consistent. It's not something that people can procrastinate. They do procrastinate, but for it to be a rallying call, you have to have, even if not majority, but loud enough and strong enough voices that will propagate that. There must be the promoters, the agitators for that. I again go back, lest we forget, that the many decisions that were made to reform the governance. There was even a department created in the NAC administration first term for the governance of public institutions. The focus on the judiciary. You remember even the surgery in the judiciary. The new constitution was also a promise, although it was delayed, and the referendum of 2005 collapsed, and then we had a problem in 2007 because the memorandum of understanding was not implemented, and it was between the elite minorities, of course, leaders of political parties then in the opposition. So it's something that can, and you know why people, even politicians, including myself, and the bigwigs, and I mean our political party leaders, always talk in favor of the Gen Zs. You know, and when a Gen Z is arrested, like happened with Rose Jerry recently, you found her being, represented in court.
Yes.
By Chief Justice Emeritus David Maraga, as the second Chief Justice under the new dispensation of Constitution Kenya 2010, and the 11th Vice President, Senior Counsel, Kalonzo Musyoka was there. The battalion of the gallant Law Society of Kenya, led by President Faith Odhiambo, they were all there, and over 100 lawyers in court, and in the courts across the country, people are looking out to see whether she was going to be producing in the courts. Otherwise, that kind of zeal is happening because of the momentous journey, the initiative, the bold initiative by the Gen Zs in 2024. Against the President Finance Bill that was being enacted. That even made the President dissolve an entire cabinet except one.
There's an insight there's an insight, Kabado, that I would like us to listen to. It's a caller who's on the line and wants to share something. Then we'd like to come back and get your thoughts about what they have to say. Diru Shah calling in from Nairobi. Diru, what are your thoughts this morning? Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
I'm really happy to talk to you people. Number one point is, do we want to stop corruption? That is first. To remove the corruption, we have to stop printing the money, and only digital money will be accepted by everybody. Smallest person has got M-Pesa account, and reducing the cost of M-Pesa is to remove all the taxes on M-Pesa. So everybody will start using M-Pesa or any digital money. So all the corruption money, which is hard cash, will be removed. That is on a lower scale of policemen and all those people. Rest, upper guys, until Parliament only deals with the laws and things, not with donations or going to churches, should be stopped totally when they carry cash money. That's my view.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. So just coming back to you, Kabando, just to then be able to hear what... this is the thing, there's a willingness across board to stop it, and it is across board. And they're just, intertwining that with some thoughts that we're getting here, where there's one that has come through again that says, you know what, if we just all follow the rule of law, if we follow the rule of law across board, from those who are not in leadership to those who are across board, if we follow the rule of law, we eliminate to a great degree all of these issues that we see. Your thoughts?
Now, I think the point that may be hiding behind this conversation is the importance of threat. The threat, when you are threatened and you know there can be action on you, then you abide. Why do you have the rule of law? It is so that it guides and it also controls, inhibits the checks and balances. Why do you have bylaws in a neighborhood, in urban areas? It's so that people living together can create regulations that will say you cannot dump your garbage at the common area. You have to put it in a covered area and pay for the service charge and so on and so forth. Why do you have a code of conduct in the corporations? It is so that people know that there are certain things, although your rights enshrined in the Constitution and inherent rights given to you by your Creator, that where you are righted, also other rights start for other individuals. I'm talking about threat, the factor of threat.
Yeah.
That, for instance, why did the call and the promise of last year, when the cabinet was being entirely dissolved, except one person, be reversed? It's because we went back to the factory settings, or rather the leadership went to factory settings, because they imagined that the threat have submerged. So you are talking to this person in the Gen Z movement, in the uprising by the young people. You compromise this other one, use intelligence to compromise another one. You talk to this politician nominates his 4 people to the cabinet. You talk to another politician who purports to represent a certain region or rather dominate the politics of that region. You get others. So you minimize the threat and then you move forward. So what we need to create is a threat, a permanent threat, before elections and after elections. And that threat, as I said, is if there's so strong movement and we promote what was, without apology, I will repeat again, the Gen Z movement. Although I'm not a Gen Z, I'm a part of the Gen Z. We subscribe to it fully, and we make it so strong an iron call that even candidates who are going to be contesting for the presidency and other seats, we know people have their limitations. Even some people have their dark spots that people are made to make full disclosures, for instance, of their wealth, and make an accountability about their shortcomings when they were given opportunity in the past in certain dockets. And those others who have not had that opportunity, make that promise solemnly in those very grassroots campaigns, coming forward with so much energy and dominating the airwaves, electronic and even verbal, such even as bands in the forest who sing that song.
Kabando, you've mentioned something about the Gen Z and the need for everybody to speak up. Yet we live in a country where public participation is a right, freedom of expression is a right given to us by the Constitution, that even our listeners say if we just follow that, our country will move in the right direction. But today, we know the case of Njeri, what happened to her when she was participating and encouraging Kenyans to participate on the same. And here comes the threat of, if you speak, I will deal with you. How then do we operate in a country where Kenyans are not respected, the Constitution is not respected, and the need for Kenyans to keep on pushing? Because then again, like then the Gen Zs would say, Kenyan, your home.
Now that example you have given, look at it in another way. I am in a total agreement with that question. It's a rhetorical and very fitting, very nice. Then look at it in another way. Why did issue of Jerry become very, very important at the public, and she was not taken to a certain dark room and taken to court, and there was not even a lawyer to represent her? Why was the country yearning for her release? Why has she become a global news item, the public participation that happened immediately she was arrested. And that's why I mentioned even about the unprecedented representation in court by lawyers who have a very special status. Now, that public participation about the jail release and the offer, I remember the president of the Law Society, the gallant Faber Debo saying, she has been located and our members will be in court. By members, she meant those chief judges, those vice presidents, anybody who belongs to the role of advocate of the Law Society of Kenya. If we make it, because in the end, after we make the criticism, like I do, and others do, after we cry, like I do and others do, and many others who even weep and get even, harmed because of exclusive. In the end, it will be about people's choice, and the formula changed so that there's that agreement and expectation. But as I said, even if the current president goes away, and he goes with the entire team and he voted all the 208 MPs and the 47 senators and governors and whatever, and then we do not have a distinct clarion call that is different from the incumbent, and that was also accorded to, agreed. You remember we had a national accord after the post-election violence of 0708 that made certain appointments made so that there was ethnic balance and there was a participation and there was and we even created a national cohesion and integration commission so that it can survey and ensure that we have balances, whether they are succeeding or not.
It's a totally different kettle of fish, Commander. Indeed.
Absolutely. So what we need to do in my own small thinking, limited thinking, because this must involve all of us and many people, and of course ideas must be shared, is to have a very serious movement that involves all these other parties. If today Kenyans rose, and they rose in all the 47 counties like they did last year, June, and said, we don't want this to happen, there is no way the government will resist for something to continue. The impunity we see by the merchant of impunity, the economic machineries we are experiencing from state corporation to state, from national social security fund, even a reception desk costing millions, or the invasion of Karura Forest and Gong Forest and other areas, or even what you are saying in the national budget year in year to about allocation of so-called renovations of state house and also the deputy president residence, and anyways for a slash fund for taking. I think this will continue unless, Professor Gary Mother once said, people get the leaders they deserve. She ended up being celebrated globally, and even a key road in the CBD named after her for her defense of Karura Forest, Uhuru Park, and other part of the country, the conservation of environment. But remember, she was rejected as a member of parliament when she was still a Nobel laureate.
Yes.
In terms of the elections. And remember, she also had contested the presidency before. And remember, in the memorandum of understanding, despite her being a pioneer PhD in the continent, female, she wasn't a full cabinet minister. She was an assistant to other ministers because other factors play part. The pre-election agreement, if it is clear and it is pronounced about these holders or positions from the smallest units, as I said, about appointment democracy, they were put in a black and white, in a bold and underlined, highlighted nicely. That is when we can realize that change. Otherwise, we will complain. We'll do our activism that we do, digital activism that you and I and other people do. The complaints we make, like I'm making here on the media. But beyond this, the noises, beyond our lamentations, we cannot rewrite the book of lamentations in the Bible. It is written already.
Indeed. The book of lamentations is already written. And, I've written about this and said a number of things. But then history also, I think, will be a judge for such that I'm about to say now. There is not a revolution. There is not a change in God. There is not a change in the way of doing things that has ever been achieved on this earth that has not been a painful, chaotic process, that there has never been a change of guard, there has never been a change in the modus operandi that takes you from mediocre or poor to good or better, that has not had a state of friction. That the people who say government and policy is done in the boardroom, but revolution is done on the streets, they know what they're talking about. If we look at progressive societies or jurisdictions today, what we call progressive by whomever chooses those definitions, that if we look into their history, that there are certain things that had to happen. There was something that broke the camel's back that said, okay, fine, this thing needs to happen, this eruption needs to occur for us to then be able to see a clear level playing field. We can't lament. It, like you said, the book of Lamentations has already been written. We cannot lament, but something needs to be done. Something needs to crack. Because if we keep stepping on the, flirting with stepping on the gas as opposed to stepping on the gas, we'll just be revving. We're not moving. Does something significant need to happen for us to realize this thing that everybody is looking for?
Yes, that it can be a very unpopular, significant thing to happen. Making leaders accountable before they assume office. Let people make declarations about their material wealth. Let them make declarations, and they are made to accord to the declarations in public places, not in hotel boardrooms, not in party headquarters, but in public rallies, whether you are going to stadiums or you are going to other open fields. Let them sit there, indicate that, once I become a governor in this area, or I become a president, particularly those two positions, I shall not appoint any of my family member as an appointee. I shall not appoint to public office without a due process. A due process means, people are entitled to be appointed. You cannot say that because somebody is a cousin or so and so cannot work in this area or the other area. But due process means in a way that is open, and in certain areas you actually prescribe completely that I shall not nominate any of my immediate family members or second line family members to a public office, for instance, in the county assembly, or in the county executive, or in the East African Legislative Assembly, or in the national government executive, or in the national parliament, as the Senate and National Assembly. Those declarations made, acceded to, and signed, and witnessed, and affirmed in the public would be part of the process of creating public accountability. If you ask people, and it has never been done in this country, now to say that for the first time, we shall make anybody running for public office make a full disclosure of the smallest piece of land you have in the farthest forlorn village or in a hamlet in a countryside. And these are the investments I've made. These are the shares I hold. It is actually expected. The declarations we make and submit to Parliament, which are not disclosed, that be made to be disclosed by public spirit. So that disclosure shows you, your spouse, your offspring, your immediate siblings, or even your parents, this is what they have. So that public disclosure can be scrutinized within a short span of time, and that accountability can be tracked, and the accountability process is easily trackable through the institutions that we have created, which unfortunately for now have been compromised by the state, and that's what you call it, state capture. The state, led by the presidency and the executive, go and capture the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. They put their cronies as commissioners there. They go to ECC, they do the same. We have a risk today, as we saw in a certain other newspaper, which I think you are related to, Standard newspaper.
Yes.
They had the headline that was very beautiful, showing in the graphics, so and so is connected with the so and so. And now this is going to be the chair of the so-called Independent Elections and Boundaries Commission. This other one is going to be a commissioner, was nominated by this, and the figures were there. It was very bold. It was very loud. Now, that is now making a scrutiny. If we were able to, and unfortunately time is running out for this particular issue.
Yes,
maybe
it
we
is.
have to up our game. We have to up our game in another way. Then there was an uprising because it's the promise we signed with you, and now you have abrogated our agreement. We can make you succumb. We can make you calm down. We can
Indeed.
make you climb down. It is possible, and this is the only way I see as getting a solution to that. A public debt. A public debt that generates a public debt. Because that public debt makes you insecure in office, such that if you have that campaign and then you have an independent parliament, because parliament is a very key institution in making the government work. And
Indeed.
the executive government, because parliament is also part of our
It is just that our time comes to an end, Kamado. But the things that you've said this morning, at the very least, will prick our conscience, will prick us to be able to think in a different direction. That a public threat then starts to be very real, and that we have to do the things that are necessary to get to the place where we need to go. It's good that we can have this conversation with you. We look forward to many more, but we want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Not easy to do it over the phone, but you have been very gracious, and we're very, very grateful for that. Asante sana.
Asanteni sana. Mola awambariki na Mola awalinde. Kenya yetu tuilinde na tuinue. We shall overcome.
Indeed. Asante sana. Kabando wa Kabando been our guest this hour at 8:01.